Friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are, the second part of a two-part series with an old friend and colleague, Mike Duggan, who's currently doing consultancy with Maish Aviation. So, Mike, thanks very much for having you back on again. Seems like only a few minutes ago we were talking.
I was going to say the exact same joke, but you beat me to it.
Hey, there you go. Hey, so those people who understand what we're talking about, they'll probably see from the same background, same clothes and everything that, we've rattled these two off quite close to each other.
Actually, I only have blue shirts. That's all I ever wear. So.
Yeah, all right. I'll remember. Cool. I'll have to remember that one. Right. Now, the second point, okay, which was brought up again, and it was also a lovely discussion that we had. But the second one is, I think, very relevant in today's business challenges and what people have to face. And it's to do with recruitment challenges. But we're talking mainly now about everything that goes around that particular exercise. So when there's a position advertised, there's only one person who's going to be successful. There are going to be several who come very close. There are going to be lots who get dismissed at the first hurdle, but there's going to be others that, are going through the exercises, etc. And that all forms a perception and an understanding or awareness about the company that they've applied for, their brand and the way they treat people, etc., etc. So that's how we started talking, Mike. And it's all about the interview process. Sometimes leaves a lot to be desired. And, should this also be a reflection of a company's DNA and values as to how they treat people afterwards or during the process?
Yeah, it's another one of these tough ones where, as you say, that there is only ever going to be one winner. Mostly when there's just the one role being recruited for, but certainly, and I'm not alone in this in the slightest in terms of experience, both recently and over the last 10 or 20, 30 years. But it is really interesting to see how some organizations marry their recruitment tactics and processes with then how they are as a business and how they're run.
Yeah.
Both in terms of systemization, care to personal issues and individuals, and the friendliness and how dynamic and fast moving they are, or whether or not they're slow and ponderous and take their time to make decisions, or because we've always done it that way kind of syndrome. And it does, in my experience, I think it does shine through. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, of course.
And it's, I mean, obviously, and again, we're only chatting, we're only talking about a topical subject, but companies haven't got the time at the moment. They haven't got skilled people enough. They are, training has been cut back. Turnover is terrible. Succession and fast track development, etc., are things that very few organizations are able to address, which they would probably love to. But the one thing that does happen is, when people go through not a great experience, but they associated themselves or thought it was a great brand, it can really, really, affect other people as well, because, word of mouth and, that's not right, it's not right, etc. It's quite a tough thing to get right, isn't it? Even though the most important thing they're looking for is to get the right person in that right position.
Well, I need to be a little bit careful here myself, Chris, because one of the key things of this is what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
And one day you're on one side of the fence, and then not so long later you're on the other side of the fence, whichever direction it is. So no sour grapes. I always try to even if I'm the loser as such, you don't hold your grudges and you treat things professionally the next time it comes around. But I think businesses do have to remember that when recruiting for people, it is as much about selling the business that they're trying to recruit people for, and people that aren't successful or that leave and come back will have a predisposition of how they deal with that business, and the people involved as well. It's unfortunate because most of the time the decisions are made without any malice of forethought. People are just trying to choose the best person they can on what they see at the time. But the processes, the time that it takes, the lack of communication in some cases, that can be all the difference for the experience of the individuals. I mean, I've, in my projects, seeking at the moment and recruitment, sometimes you go for quite senior, very important roles, you get zero feedback after the event, and you've taken time to create presentations, attend interviews, travel, put a lot of time in it, let alone the emotional, roller coaster that you go through. And then all you get back is a system generated email, or maybe if you're lucky, a personal email, but all it says is thanks, but no thanks, and come back next time.
Yeah. It's funny.
Well, really sorry to
Go
push
ahead, no, go
on. I think even for let's say for when recruiting in numbers for, let's say, some of the resources we need at our airports, baggage handlers or cargo warehouse people, I think it's still important to give them feedback as to what they can do better and how they can find, where was the mismatch? Or why was the other candidate candidates chosen, that bit better? What was the circumstances? Was it an internal event? That kind of information softens the blow, makes you feel better about who you've been talking to, makes it feel more real. And I think companies have a lot to learn, and especially individuals who are recruiting forget that this is a people business, and there's a lot of hearts and minds that are really that need to be cared for and looked after. It's a tough time for people to be in this situation.
No, I agree, Mike. And I did a workshop about 3 months ago, and there was a big mix of ages and big mix of people with different experience, etc. But the top 3 points that they came up with, one was, which you've just covered, absolutely no feedback or guidance whatsoever, so that they felt more concerned and reflective about what they did wrong instead of things that they did well or areas that they could improve on.
Yeah.
So that was the first one. The second one was the length of the process. So what they said was that they weren't even sure whether they were still in a process because they hadn't heard. And because they hadn't heard and they were applying for other roles, they were going for different interviews. And they then started to compare what the organizations were like. And so we did this survey of, how large was the business they were going for, the position, etc., and what was the different type of experience. And then the third one was that there was very little reference to the business's values or minimum expectations. It was all based on certain key points from a long list that was just the job description. But the link to the values and being clear, having that clarity of what the minimum expectations were, they said if they had that, they might have seen themselves that they had a certain gap, and they would have done a little bit more research or a little bit more preparation before they actually went for the interview or the workshop, not workshops, when there's a big selection process, when there's quite a few people and they do role plays and things like that.
Yeah, and it's hard to be critical. I've done quite a bit of recruiting myself, but it's very hard to filter and get down and understand who what the key talents of people are.
Yeah,
CVs are notoriously difficult documents. They have to be short in nature to get people to read sufficient amount of it, but then again miss out on detail or specifics to individual roles and potential talent that's needed for specific jobs. This is where often we end up, employing people because we like them and we think that we can mold them into the kind of, talent that we need.
Yeah.
And therefore it becomes a bit of an art. But yet, a lot of businesses and HR departments, maybe it's because of the training that HR has received. Now there are so many HR accreditations out there that you often feel like you're being treated as just a commodity rather than as a person. And I think the HR industry and recruitment industry itself needs to remember that. And they far too often are just becoming CV crunchers. And now with the advent of AI, and system screening of CVs and individuals, we're even losing even more of the personal touch.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Mike. But one of the things that that did come out in the workshop as well was that they appreciate that there's volumes and volumes of people who are really keen to get into certain companies or certain jobs, and they have to go through, whether it's AI generated or supported, but they have to go through certain screening tests and exercises. But ironically, people weren't worried about that. What they wanted was that in their Dear John or Dear Jane response, was that they were given a little bit more insight into the screening process.
Yeah.
So whatever the criteria is that the company puts into the system, they just wanted to know a little bit about that criteria, because if they said, certain number of questions that are answered incorrectly will then put you out of blah, blah, blah. They just wanted to know that, so that it wasn't something that they did totally wrong, and then would learn from it for the next time. So it's a fine balance. It's a tough one.
I don't know when the last time you were on in the dating scene, Chris, but probably a while, I guess.
Well, I would like to think you said that because you know how long I've been married, and also because I don't need to be on that particular team.
There is
I know where you're going to.
There is a buzzword in that environment, though, and it is a really good analogy, as much as it is a bit of a joke. But ghosting, in especially from these apps and dating apps and things, where people interact and start and then go dead cold and never hear ever again, not even a pipsqueak.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that also happens in the recruitment industry, and not just at lower levels, but at very senior executive positions as well. Apply for a job and you hear nothing for months, not even, you maybe get an acknowledgement at best, and then nothing. And ghosting is probably one of the most horrible feelings, to just not hear anything back. When it's an important thing, finding a job. This isn't just about dating,
No. And Mike, I mean, not that I would have any idea whatsoever. And if any of my family are listening to this, they'll know exactly where I'm coming from, because I've been married a long time. Might I make a suggestion? Get yourself some different colour shirts.
Good point.
Mix it up a bit, mate. Mix it up a bit. But I know what you're saying, but it's so tough. And ironically, of the three age groups which attended, so you had up to 30, then I put 30 to 45 and 45 and above. The ones that had believe it or not, the ones that had the most problem were the ones in that middle group.
Really?
Yeah. And when I say most problems, they had the most problems with accepting or understanding why. Said to the younger ones, they said, well, it's probably because we didn't have enough experience, blah, blah, blah. And you say to the older ones, and they say, well, it's just a matter of time. We're at the latter end and all that. But the ones in the middle, well, it was because they didn't get any hints whatsoever to change. And what they were saying, they had plenty of time to change in themselves.
Yeah. And that feedback is crucial to help them in so many ways. I've heard of a lot of people in the recruitment process, they end up going and doing courses for self-betterment, MBAs, take a sabbatical. But knowing, where where you could go and improve yourself, or what areas you could target for that, that's also important.
Yeah.
That middle group of people, that's unfortunate. I think I've just about come out of that now, but I do remember it, and it's you still got a lot to change and develop and learn. I'm still learning now, but I can see how that would be that would apply.
Yeah, and that's what they wanted, because they said they had enough time and effort and energy to change direction, even if they felt that they weren't aware that they should do.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're stuck in your ways, then you stick to what you know, and then you hope that that's going to open a door for you. And then when you're younger, there's so many opportunities that, you sort of think, oh, well, it'll be all right. It will come soon. And please, it does for everybody. I
think we should also be aware that, especially, let's take a big Middle Eastern airline. I know during COVID, their HR department was run ragged, reducing numbers of staff, pilots, ground staff.
Yep.
And then it was their turn, and the HR department itself was then
Yep.
in, let's say, in half. COVID finished. The next thing we know, they're recruiting wildly again. And unfortunately, that HR department is half the size it was.
Correct.
And doesn't have the time or whatever wherewithal to be that perfect HR person. And just this really becomes a needs must. They've got to recruit as many as they can. And all of these mistakes that we've been identifying, they come to the fore.
Yeah.
So I think and that's an extreme example, obviously, with, during COVID and then post COVID. And I'd hope that by now we're back to normal in most of those areas. But nevertheless, air cargo industry 2023 has been particularly bad. Companies are under a lot of financial pressure, bottom lines, etc., protecting for the future. So, investment in that time and effort for what a lot of, especially finance officers, will look at and say, well, where's the real return on it?
Yeah.
Is going to be low. And then the individual hiring managers are saying, well, I've got to run my day job today, let alone, worry about how Mike Duggan or whoever else feels when he's been, gone through a recruitment process. I've got to, get on with my job.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mike. But surely now this is a chance now to show how AI can actually improve things and help people, because, like I say, the same criteria for the algorithms or how they guide it should also now give the opportunity to give some really good feedback.
I hope so. Of course, the old adage, I think, still lies true with AI, which is, BS in is BS out. So
yeah, but well, let's hope that BS stands for better standards moving forward, because if it does, then there's a good opportunity that people will at least get some sort of they get some sort of transparency or clarity. There's nothing worse than not knowing, Mike, and thinking it's everything that you've done yourself.
One of the beauties I love about the air cargo side of the business, and rather than the passenger side especially, and this is something that we need to be pushing strongly, especially in a recruitment environment where we're trying to attract talent. And everyone I know, whenever I talk about the airline industry, they're, oh, wonderful, you've got, first class, business class, travel around the world. I'm like, sorry, I'm on the air cargo side of things. I deal with boxes, and boxes are great because they don't talk back. And then they raise their eyebrows. And I say, but hold on a sec, I'm actually being a bit flippant. I love the air cargo side of business because we are really a B2B and people-to-people business.
Yeah.
While the boxes don't talk back, we know the people shipping those boxes really well. We know the end customers and we know the suppliers that are handling them. And this recruitment exercise, as we come back to maybe what we started in the beginning, in terms of one day you're recruiting someone, the next day they're your customer or they're your supplier, is we are a people business, and we need to remember that.
What you've just said there, right? So now imagine if you were pumping in the criteria that you needed for people across the board, and as well as I do, Mike, customer service at the moment is poor everywhere, right? Not just in our industry, but
across the board.
Yeah, food and beverage, hospitality, retail, wherever you go. Now, surely, if you're putting certain criteria and minimum expectations in for certain roles, you'd put an emphasis on that, and there'd be certain gearing towards that during the process. And if you're unsuccessful, I don't think it would be that difficult for you, to get a little overview of where you could or should or might look to improve to make yourself more attractive, shall we say, in the dating world, but to make yourself more attractive for others, and learn from it. And that's where, making people understand that people want quality, they want service, they want to feel special. They don't want to keep waiting and somebody says, like, I'll call you back in 10 minutes and it takes 40 minutes, or you're on hold for 35, 40 minutes. And if people can start to realize that if you can make somebody feel better than the way you felt worse when you experienced it, you're doing something right.
Yeah, and we all know how that feels every time. And it reflects immediately on the business. And the next time you face a decision whether you're going to buy from one company or another, and they've kept you on the phone for 3 hours under that stupid hold music, and then when someone does eventually answer, they're the wrong person, they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It reflects immediately.
Yeah.
And I'll come back to the fact, air cargo as an industry, as businesses, we're trying to make it more attractive. We're trying to sell the fact that we're important to industry, to health and pharma and poverty around the world, and all of those good things that air cargo produces. We're trying to attract people and make it a better business. And each time we act in the wrong way, and these specifically recruitment we're talking about today, it impacts the future of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And both individually and as a whole for the industry. So
yeah. No, it does, Mike. It does. And listen, thanks very much for your time. You just give me an idea for another one, which is how to select music when you're putting people on hold. If the selection might have been better, it might not be such a terrible experience. So if they put the Teskey Brothers on with "Hold Me," maybe people will be a little bit more happier when somebody does answer it. But listen, thanks very much for your time, mate. Always a pleasure. Look forward to having a beer with you soon somewhere, and good luck with everything going into 2024.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. Really good to talk to you, and thank you for inviting me on. Appreciate the chance to put myself out there as well, and some really interesting subjects. So thanks again.